tracked 30 La Jolla detached sellers who either reduced their price or pulled off market during the holiday season. Half of them sold so far, but what about the other half? Let's break it down. Quick recap on the two study groups. The first group was study group A, the sellers who reduced their price between December 1st and January 1st. That was a total of 12 homes. The second group was study group B, the sellers who pulled off market between December 14th and January 1st. That was a total of 21 homes. There is some overlap between the two groups, so therefore this study follows 30 homes total. And please note, this is not a study on the entire market for this particular video. We're specifically following up with the sellers who were already showing signs of resistance and pressure during the holiday season. And what it shows us is that the market is still moving, but the buyers are selective. So as of today, May 9th, out of the 30 homes total, 15 have sold so far, so half of them. 11 of them are off market and 4 are active. The 15 closed sales ranged from 1.7 million up to 5.85 million, with majority of the activity concentrated in the $2 and $3 million ranges. So that means the homes above 5.85 million have not sold yet. But that's not to say the upper end La Jolla market is dead, because it's not, okay? So for example, we just had Palomar and the Beach Barber tract close fast. It closed just 4 days after the initial active date. They likely had the buyer beforehand. So that property closed at $14.5 million, down roughly 3.3% from its initial list price of nearly $15 million. So clearly the high end is still moving. Here's an important fact. Out of all 30 homes, 29 of them had to reduce their price. So that means just one property avoided a reduction. That was a home on Draper Avenue in the Village. And this property was also the only property out of the 15 sold homes that closed at its original list price, because everything else sold below. The house went contingent in 50 days, also making it the second fastest home out of the sold homes to get under contract, okay? And the property also actually increased its price from 2.535 up to 2.795 million while on market, so just over 10%. But that did not change the outcome, because the property ended up closing for the original list price of 2.535 anyways. So out of the 30 homes total, we actually had 4 sellers, all who ended up landing in the $2 million range, actually increased their prices, including this property. But that increase did not change the outcome for the other sellers either, except one is still active, so we shall see. So this was not a market rewarding aspirational pricing. This was a market forcing sellers to adjust. And that's not to say price increases haven't worked in the past. They certainly have, okay? Now, continuing with the homes that sold, the lowest price sale was also the fastest sale to move. That was La Pintura in the Meerlands, which closed for $1.7 million. It went pending in just 33 days. The home was originally listed at just around $2.4 million, and then they did one sharp reduction to just under $2 million. And then the property ended up selling roughly 29% below, again at $1.7 million. So this was not a traditional move-in ready value story, okay? The property rests on nearly an acre with potential to add a second story to capture ocean views. And actually, if you drive by the property, you can see that it appears to be heavily gutted. So it's safe to conclude the buyer was actually purchasing the land, the street, and the upside of that particular neighborhood. On the other end, the highest price sale was Copa de Oro in La Jolla Mesa, which goes for $5.85 million. According to the MLS, it was a recently completed 2025 build with panoramic views of the ocean, the bay, all the way down to Coronado and downtown. But even with that type of product, it still took 332 days to go pending from the original list date, so almost a year. And that property went through 3 different agents before selling as well. It initially started at $7.5 million, and the buyer did not even respond until it was listed just under $6 million with the third agent, and then it sold 22% below the original list price. So what does that show us? That shows us that even a good product like that, a great product, still has to meet the market. A few other properties stood out. The longest sold timeline, meaning the longest to go pending under contract, was a property in Bird Rock, which sold for just over $2 million. It took 336 days to go pending from the original active date. After 5 reductions, it ended up selling about 22% below its original list price of nearly $2.6 million. Another sold property in the Beach Barber tract stood out because they made 8 separate incremental reductions, which was the most reductions out of all 15 sold properties. So the takeaway isn't necessarily how much it ended up selling below list price, original list price, which was 10%. It was how many steps and how long it took to get there, because again, they had to make 8 reductions. So the timeline was 220 days to go pending under contract. So about 7 months, right? So time is money. So if you're actually making less cuts that are larger rather than small incremental ones, it'll be way more effective. And the largest discount among the sold properties was for a home in Upper Hermosa, which ended up closing roughly 31% below its original list price. Starting at $5.695 million, it sold for $3.95 million. That property took 218 days to go pending under contract, so also about 7 months. So the pattern is not linear for all these properties, right? But what we can see is that when the sellers started too high, the market ultimately forced a correction. Now let's look at the homes that have not sold yet. We have 4 active as of today. One in the $2 million, 3, $8 and $27 million ranges. All 4 properties have reduced at least twice, and their timelines range from 324 days to 701 days since their initial list dates. So these properties have been trying to sell for about a year to 2 years. And the property in the $8 million range does need a quick note. You can pause to read. Now looking at the 11 off-market properties. These are the homes that have not sold yet and are not currently active on market as of today. So the homes range from the $2 million range up to the $12 million range, with most of the activity concentrated between the $3 to $5 million ranges. So one property that stood out is a waterfront property that reduced about 32%. So the original list price was just under $11 million. After 4 reductions, they ended up in the $7 million range. And then the seller ended up pulling the plug after 574 days from the original active date. So this property also, it's in a neighborhood where waterfront in the 7-figure range is a highly desirable asset class. And nearby waterfront homes in the same neighborhood recently traded. So the issue isn't that the buyers are not there, they clearly are, okay? The market is still moving. Another major example is a property in the $9 million range, nearly $10 million, that made 13 separate price reductions, down roughly 23% from just under $13 million over 307 days. And the property still came off market without a sale. So the 13 price reductions was also the most reductions we saw out of all 30 homes within this particular study group. So this property, they had also advertised, like a good portion of those reductions were from an advertisement that they said that they were going to reduce the price by a set amount every week. But that still did not result in a sale. So the takeaway from this is that, constant price movement, price adjustment may not always create demand, right? So the pricing still has to meet the market of today. There was also a property built in 2017 in the $3 million range that pulled off market after just 104 days and 2 reductions. So down about 10%. So only about 3 months on market, okay? And this may be a case where the seller exited too early, or they may need to do further price adjustments because it is a beautiful, gorgeous product and it sits in a part of La Jolla that is extremely scarce. Right? And we know scarcity is power. That's your leverage, right? So what's interesting though is that their neighbor just listed their house. And although their neighbor's house is not a direct comparable because it required TLC, the neighbor listed their house just under $3 million. And I'm not even kidding, it went pending in 5 days and it's already sold. The neighbor's house literally already sold just recently, a few days ago. So the thing is that the buyers clearly are there. They are. So again, that seller may need to do further price adjustments. So here's the takeaway. The market is still moving. Half of the properties sold. The other half didn't. We have some active, off market, some who rented their properties, remodeling their properties. And remember, these are the sellers who were selling during the holiday season. And what do we know about the holidays? That the buyers are more price sensitive. The buyer pool is thinner. The buyers are more selective. They're looking for a deal, okay? So if the pricing does not align with the product from the beginning, then you can end up like the 15 sellers who didn't sell, right? You may end up like that, where you have to pull the plug and have to rent your house out instead or wait. And also, please understand this. I've been tracking the market for 16 months now, ever since January 19th, 2025. And we're seeing a pattern repeat again, which is the spring buyers tend to lean towards properties that do not have a history of recent reduction. They get the new stuff. Once we approach summertime, that's when you start to see more homes that have a history of recent reductions starting to move. So some of these properties may just need more time, may come back during the summertime when that is the case, because right now, the probability that you're going to get picked with a history of recent reductions is significantly lower than when you're to list in the summertime. That's just the way it is. So anyways, thank you for watching. I'm Tara Ravenbach, your La Jolla Native Insider. We'll catch you soon for our Bird Rock $9 to $11 million range update. Thank you and have a great night.